So we've been talking a little bit over the last little while about some of the challenges that we face in this space, working in this space with culturally and linguistically diverse students. And so the panel is going to share some of their learning and thinking about this. So we're going to go through, I'm going to pose some questions to the panel, and they'll respond to you, and then there'll be lots of opportunity for kind of exploring and discussing that as well. So if our panel is ready to go, I am going to kick us off with the first question. My first question is, what do you think the core challenges are that culturally and linguistically diverse learners face in online learning environments, and how can we as educators begin to mitigate those challenges? I'm going to throw that one to Kathy to start with, please.
Hello, thank you, Nick. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Wow, we have really had some challenges in the last year and a half. There's no doubt about it. I was teaching a course when the pandemic hit in Ontario and had to pivot overnight, literally. And there were enormous challenges for everyone, but particularly for my international students. We had the common elements of, I was seeing fear, I was seeing grieving, I was seeing anxiety, I was seeing, what else? Loneliness, a detachment, because all of a sudden they couldn't be with other people. And these factors caused an enormous amount of stress. Then you had the situation where now I'm working from home, now I'm learning from home. And if you had small children, the children were interfering. And if I had a spouse, my spouse was interfering. If I had a dog or a cat, they were on the computer. And this goes on. But in the beginning, we weren't ready for that. So everyone was more or less in an anxiety panic mode. And I saw this doubling in my international students, which caused me great anxiety because there was a lot of tears. And so I spent a lot of my time just going, let's talk. And I had to suddenly rethink what we were doing in class. Some of my international students were not making the connections. They couldn't get online. They didn't have the bandwidth. The government was shutting them down. Even the students that were in Ontario were maybe out in the country, or their parents had said, we're going to the cottage, and they suddenly couldn't get online. And that would cause them great distress. And so I was getting phone calls. I gave out my cell number. I didn't used to. All of my students have my cell number. Now, the international students that were actually living abroad that actually went home, and a few of them had to, they didn't call me on the cell number, but I would get emails from them, often in a panic mode. So there was that whole level we're dealing with. And then on top of that, in an online environment, I was not seeing them and seeing their responses in the same way, and I could not assess or evaluate how much they were understanding. And usually I'm a very face-to-face person, so I count a great deal on facial expression, body language, tone, and I wasn't getting this anymore. So I had to find other ways to assess what their levels were. Their level of understanding, their levels of understanding my expectations of them. So I was finding things had to be written much more often. Anything that I presented had to be on a slide with written instruction. Now, being in teacher education, I would have done that anyway, but it was even more detailed, and everything slowed down. I couldn't do things at a quick pace anymore because people weren't keeping up. They also were incredibly stressed by too much screen time in a very short amount of time, the eye strain. And so I had to start giving more breaks and checking in constantly, especially with my international students. And if we were doing it remotely in synchronous, then I could check in more easily. But if it was asynchronous, it was this constant emailing. Are you there? Do you understand? Can we talk? What do you need? I've never asked so many questions. But what I learned was those were important all the time. So the linguistic understanding and knowing where they were culturally made an enormous difference. Because if they were in China, or they were in India, or they were in Japan, it changed their understanding of what I was doing. Also, I found I was making assumptions about the language I was using, thinking they would understand it. And their context of where they were from and the education they had meant they had no concept of what Ontario teaching and learning was about. So it also became more visual. I had to present a lot more pictures. This is what I'm talking about. This is what it actually looks like, bringing in videos. So I think it improved my practice because I had to really think through more about what was happening, where they were, and how much they could actually understand and take in what I was doing. Can I turn it over to you, Mustafa? What do you have to say about that? Musarraf, are you there?
Yes, yeah, I am there. As you were expressing your thoughts, I could reflect them on my experience also. I'm a student at a university in Bangladesh, and as the pandemic happened, they shifted all of our classes to online, and the major challenge was to get everyone on board. Not everyone is tech savvy enough to understand how to use different kind of technologies. If I'm currently sitting in Bangladesh and the rain is happening outside and I'm just having poor connections, the problem is that the communication between teacher and student was not clear due to this kind of difficulties. As I was sitting in my room and I had my parents back in there and my teacher is another room, they cannot match the experience. In the normal time, as I entered my class, I had an expectation that I will go into my class, I will meet my peers, and I will sit down in the bench, and the class will proceed. But in online learning, I'm doing something else, and then I suddenly remembered that I had a class, so I'm joining from anywhere. That preparation, that additional preparation that I used to take, that makes a lot of difference in online and offline learning.
I found the same thing. That I was teaching technology, which for me was new, but yeah.
Yeah, it becomes just part of that pedagogical approach that you have to build in. You have to build in that extra time for those things, right? That's it.
Yes. We're going to go into breakout room. Now, everyone look at the bottom of the screen and you see there's an ellipsis, there's 3 dots. Click on that. And I had to take them through. And I also sent out emails beforehand asking who's tech savvy, who thinks they can support this role, so that they became in charge of breakout rooms. So they would be able to share screens and things like that, so the others could learn how to do it, and it would bring down their anxiety levels again. Mm-hmm. So did you find they were anxious?
Yeah, I find that many of us were anxious. I can share a story about my class that one of my professors gave us an assignment to turn in Google Classroom. So when assignment is assigned, then there is the option to turn in individual documents for every student. So from my Google account, I can create a doc for myself. But most of my peers didn't understand that process, and they all ended up answering the questions in the comment section.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very common.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, was having the same issues, and I can't say that I was technologically savvy, but I took every seminar under the sun, and now I give workshops in it. So we all learn, right? We adjust.
Yeah.
I saw Owe has joined us. Can you hear us and jump in on this if you've got something to share, Owe?
Had to first of all try to cope with the online education. A lot of them were not prepared mentally. A lot of them were not prepared psychologically. So it was a challenge. They needed that psychological morale booster, that they needed that encouragement, they needed to be mentally ready. And so the first few months of the online classes, a lot of the students were trying to adjust to the new normal. So that was one major challenge, included with the fact that some of the students were not tech savvy, and so found it.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, we have a number of things we want to talk about. I wonder if we can move on to another question here, because I think we're starting to kind of bleed into some of the other issues that we wanted to talk about. I wonder, Mosarif, how did you engage your international students? What are the sort of the things that you had to do to help build community in that group? You know, and how did it feel to try and do that?
What I have experienced, that the major challenge, as we were also talking in online education and engaging all of our students, including the international students, that we have to create a bridge of engagement between us and them, and we shifted towards online education. We tried to adopt online open learning platforms, but I think that there is one question I must ask, that does our teaching learning methods saw that shift? To make my class engaging, I tried out few things. One is to make myself accustomed to technology. If I don't understand how everything operates, then my student will be in anxious position, and they will feel nervous about it. And another thing was that there were different web tools which helped me to make my classes more engaging, like Kanban boards and Mentimeter, Padlets. They allowed me to have various combination of engagement for every classes. When I take sessions, some of the students might not in the position to share his voice due to background noises, or he might feel shy in speaking in front of all. So that writing in the Mentimeter or Padlet helped me to include him in my class. Another strategy I took is to create groups of students in my whole classroom. So in a session, I would have a small part where whole class is divided into groups, and they were given different kinds of problems to solve, and they have to present it in front of the whole class. So when this happens, all of my students are in their room or in their country, in this whole world.
I think we might have lost Mo for a second. Kathy or Owe, do you want to jump in on that and add anything to that from your experiences?
Owe, please.
Yes, thank you. One of the things I did was, as a science-oriented teacher, I
I think we're having some connectivity issues with Owe as well. This is a demonstration of exactly what it's been like for the last year.
Very much so.
We're hearing your voice breaking up a lot. Sorry, Owe. We're getting kind of a robot version of you at the moment. Kathy, do you want to jump in for a second just while I message Owe in the background?
And at least we have a slightly better connection here at the present. How did I build community? Wow, that became really an important issue for me, because in teacher education, I feel relationships are really important. So I wanted to build these relationships, and so many of my students felt disengaged. They felt isolated. So I did a lot of research on that particular event. How can I do this online? How can I do this particularly with my international students who are far, far away? And I discovered two things that really made a difference in my practice. One was social penetration theory, which is about intimacy and peeling the onion. And the other one were for immediacy behaviors that broke down these layers. And so I engaged them. And one of the biggest one was self-disclosure. So I started, and storytelling I know, but I didn't often use it in class, and now I use it all the time. So I would share a story about me, something hilariously embarrassing, and they would all laugh. And I say, now I want you to go into your groups and share something funny that happened to you. And it started to bond them, and they started to break down the issues of the isolation, and it started to build a community. And they would come back together, and I could tell them something else. I would tell them about a mistake I made as a teacher, or tell them a mistake, I made in an assignment once, and it made me human. So that really helped build the community. And the other thing I had to do was show a teacher support, and that came through as caring. The empathy really needed to be there. And for example, yes, I hear you. My father has COVID. I'm terrified. I hear you. My daughter, is in a depression. I hear you. And let them talk, and then say, how can I help you? Do you need an extension? Mm-hmm. Now, those kinds of words didn't used to come out of professors, but it certainly comes out of me on a regular basis now. How can I help you? You set the date. I'm not going to penalize you because of everything that's going on. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the gratitude, and it was significant, and it brought down again the stress levels. So those kinds of immediacy behaviors seem to really help, and that all contributed to building a community that we cared about each other, that we fit together, that we helped each other. And those sorts of things became really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've really hit on something there, that you're talking about humanizing the learning environment. That's really what you're yes. talking about there, making those human connections, and I guess to some extent flattening the power dynamic between members of the class and yourself as well. But I think also what's really important too there is you demonstrating early on what it means to be open and to be human, because there's a lot of places, there's a lot of times you see in syllabi that they have the outline of what's going to happen if something goes wrong, and then it gets applied in a different way. And students are distrustful of that a lot of the time because their experience is not necessarily good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're already afraid, so everything
right.
compounds. But I had to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
So, and that opened up all kinds of doors and windows for people sharing and trusting one another and moving forward. And I ended up having really great success, which, as a result, there will always be some kind of component of online or remote, whether synchronous or asynchronous, because I could see value then in both. Oh, you're back. Oh, wait, please say something.
Yes, I'm back. One of the strategy I used was as a science and a medical related teacher, we moved usually from known to the unknown. I am very aware that my students were very familiar with a popular social media app, WhatsApp. So I tried to get them together using the WhatsApp media. I tried to enlighten them first on the WhatsApp group, told them all they needed to know, trained them, opened their mind, brought them out from the pandemic, as it were, and got them ready to go. So I used the WhatsApp media app first to get the students ready. And then I migrated them gradually to whatever media I wanted to use in passing my instructions to them. So in using the WhatsApp media app, I've built them from the known to the unknown. They are very conversant, very familiar with the WhatsApp media. And then over time, we now migrated to perhaps the Google Meet, or even the Teams, or even using the Zoom. So that was one technique that I applied. And that is one technique that I also advise that we apply, so that students, we can get them to move from the known to the unknown. Thank you.
I want to touch on something that both of you kind of just touched on there for a second. So, Owe, you talked about, you teach medical students, you're in STEM field as well. and Kathy, you're teaching in humanities and you're teaching in education, which is a very human field. Do you think that there are discipline-specific considerations around how we build relationships in an online space?
Oh, wait, I'd love to hear this. So.
I think you're on mute. Oh, wait. Yes, there we go. We have you back. Can you hear us, Owe?
Yes, I can hear you.
So do you think that there are discipline-specific things that you need to do to kind of build those relationships? Does it matter? Does discipline matter, or are we all just human?
Yes, discipline is vital in building these relationships. Very vital.
Okay. Oh, wait, I think we've lost you again. Well, I heard a key term, relationships.
Yes. Owe, I think was about to tell us about how discipline is vital to building relationships. Kathy, from your perspective, or Mo, I think Mo Sharif's still in the background there, your perspectives on that?
I think relationships are key to just about everything. In my opinion, but I'm only in, yes, the humanities. I'm, in education. I also have an arts background. So these things are significant to me. I'm biased. I get that. But if I don't have a relationship, there's no trust, and how are they going to move forward? And if I'm modeling for students, particularly in education, whether they're teaching kindergarten or grade 3 or grade 12 or higher education, there has to be some kind of a bond or relationship or a trust in order for them to fulfill their potential. And I think that's my role, to help them fulfill their potential, whatever their potential, is. So building that kind of a relationship is important to me, and then learning to build relationships with each other, so then they will go out into their fields, whatever their fields are, and be able to make those connections, those humane connections. I've never had a doctor that I trusted unless I could talk to them. So
well, that's actually a really good point, Kathy, because many people had to adjust to the idea of speaking to a doctor, of having virtual consultations with a doctor. So I think Owe's back again too. I wonder what your perspective on that is. Do you think, as part of medical students' training, how they've been exposed to having to learn that way now, that might change the way that they practice as a doctor down the track?
Owe, can you answer that? Oh, we're still frozen. Okay.
Oh, we lost too.
I can add to another part that the field, the variation of field, does it have any kind of impact on teaching learning? I had my bachelor in engineering, and then I jumped into education and done a PhD, and currently I'm doing master's in business. So I had an experience of the three fields in together. But if I ask you a simple question, which teacher do you remember from your university? The teacher who taught you most, or the teacher you were connected most? So I think the common answer would be the teacher who valued me and with whom I have the proper relationship. So in case of online or offline, I think the relationship matters most while we are practicing education.
Yeah, I think that speaks to Gabriella's point in the chat as well about, how do you build that? What's the way in which we kind of develop the equivalent of a one-on-one contact with a teacher in an online space? Is it through email? Is it through, engaging through other communication ways? And how do we kind of replicate that? And her point is, do you think that there are, in using those multimodal approaches, are there ways that it could be better in the online space? Can you actually communicate better with people in there?
If I take that, I think it depends on the student to teacher ratio we are talking about. If I had to teach a lot of people, then it would be impossible for me to follow up each of the individuals in a week or in a month also. But if I teach a small amount, then there could be multiple variations. We can communicate through emails, as well as we can have different kind of office hours for our students so that they can speak up to us on one-on-one version. And one thing I really love about online education and online learning, that it has made our teacher more accessible to our students. If a student had to speak to a teacher, they had to go to the faculty room and find the time about it. And now we can just communicate between emails and set a time or appointments for the sessions. So I think it will depend on the number of students we are talking per teacher.
I have to agree with you there, because if you have 200 students in your class, how are you going to build those kinds of relationships? And like I have 40 approximately, so there's a big difference. And even with 40, you have to work at it, but that makes a difference. That matters, the amount of students. I also found reaching out to them to find out where they're at, give us some idea of their cultural background, what's important to them, what they value, what they find funny, what they enjoy, their interests. So I get some kind of a profile from them. And again, if I have 200 students, that's an awful lot of reading. So that makes a difference, obviously. So that's a really good point.
I'm cognizant of the time that we're at. We've got about 15 minutes left, and we wanted to spend some time open to the floor for conversation and questions. But I wonder if I could throw this one last question to you all before we jump into the open question session, and that is, thinking back to what you know now. If you could go back and prepare yourself for another pandemic that was about to hit us in a few months, what would you do differently? What would you want to know? What would you want to learn to prepare for what was coming?
If I jump into it, if I knew that there's a pandemic coming, I would take two different approaches: one for the short term and one for the long term. For the long term one, I would try to build the technological support for my students and teachers, train them, give them proper mindset that they must have to adapt with new technologies and new situations that they might not have ever been. So in my country, we have seen some resistance for our teachers, that there are many teachers in our country are in their 50s, and it is difficult for them to learn new technology overnight. So it took around 6 months to get on board with the online learning in my country. So I would try to, for the long term, I would try to teach my teachers and students about the blended learning approach and make them acquainted with the online learning things. As speaking for myself, I was in the classroom in March 22, and then on April 22, I'm in the Zoom classroom. So this shift has a very negative effect. So I would prepare my students and teachers and all other stakeholders relating to the education to prepare for that and have a mindset for that. Another thing is that the curriculum we have built, if I speak about the offline education, it mostly focuses on the long-term benefits, that if you complete the 4-year course or 3-year course, then you will have the opportunity to. But for this kind of emergency situation, I would think that there are some minimum competencies students must have. So we can create an emergency curriculum. If any time, any situation we had to face another pandemic, then we can provide that support. Just like this one, we had to teach around 1 billion people how to cover their nose after a sneeze. So I think those emergency curriculum could be a possible one. For the short-term one, one thing I really from my perspective, one thing I really find the online education very fruitful, that for students who are in the K-12 sections, those are underaged, the parents were very concerned, which was very rare in our part of nation, that the parents were not engaged in the teaching learning. So when we try to start the education up and running, then parents come forward. So we can think about the community learning. How can second generation learners can teach the first generation learners in the classroom, in their houses, in their community, and we can develop something for students who do not have any kind of internet access. We can learn through plays and many things. So we can take community initiatives. We can build leaders in the community who will take in part if any kind of emergency happens. We don't know what next pandemic might come, what might be the next emergency. So I think these two approach I would be taking if I had another chance.
I could
All right,
agree.
if I can come in, Morifab.
Yeah, Owe, if you want to jump in.
Yes, Morifab mentioned quite a lot that we should do or we will do. However, one other thing I would have loved to do if I'm aware of a pandemic forthcoming is to have adequate time to train the students. A lot of the students were not handy, savvy with technology as it were. I would have had enough time to train the students and teach them properly on how they can use some of these media. And then I would have also had a plan, because science-oriented teachers had challenges during this pandemic. Practical courses were not well taught. I would have drawn up a plan that could see how we could capture practical classes online. Perhaps teachers would have done some demonstrations in their offices, recorded live, and then they can show this video in their online teaching. That's another thing. And then better plan to reach the rural areas. A lot of students suffered during this pandemic. They couldn't learn because there were either no internet services, poor internet services in the rural areas. So I would have planned better on how we can reach the rural areas, as well as those who could not afford internet services. You know, there's a digital divide. We'll have tried to bridge the gap in the digital divide so that we can capture as many students as we can on the international scene. These are some of the things I would have done better if I'm aware of a pandemic, or if I have to prepare for a subsequent pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Owe. Absolutely.
Kathy, any last thoughts on that one just before we open it up to the floor?
Sure, and this also reflects back on one of the comments I saw in the chat. Yes, we had to train them with technology, and oh boy, we really need to do more of that. And but what I also discovered was I had to change my assignments. I redid my syllabus. I rewrote the assignments. Yes, we still had to have the expectations and the academic levels and all the rest of it, but I needed something that was a bit lighter, and this is what came up in the chat. They need to do something, and that's exactly it, and writing a paper is not doing. So my assignments became much more multimodal, especially for the international, and they loved that. The reaction was so strong. Instead of writing a paper in English, I would like to see an infographic. Oh, okay. And it came right off the page. They were fantastic. And I actually had them go out and do like storytelling, and then they had to videotape it, and then they had to send it to a school so a teacher could use it. And I didn't used to do those things as much. A little bit, but not as much. And they also had to have choice. Mm-hmm. Choice became paramount, so they could fit themselves into whatever it was they needed. And if the technology was a problem, then they weren't going to go this way, but they could go this way. And finding a way in, and a way where they could feel productive, creative, and not necessarily relying on the technology, but finding a way through, that became important. And that is something I don't want to lose. So whether another pandemic hits or not, that is something I've got to hold on to.
Yeah, that switch to evaluation strategies that are much more meaningful and nuanced and that are authentic and real and hopefully recyclable as well and able to be used elsewhere. I think that's a really important point. Can I open it to the floor now? We've got a few comments coming in and we've tried to address some of those along the way, but questions for the panel, please.
I see one here in the chat. I'm not sure if it was addressed, but I can bring it up. This is from Musraf. You mentioned you were less prepared for online class because you didn't have to go through the process of physically going to class. Do virtual classes feel like less education? What would help you better prepare?
I don't think that the online educations are less of education. That they are a new kind of experience, I think. New kind of way of learning things. For me, the transition with what I have faced was very difficult for me too. If I had a blended learning opportunities, that I had classes on my online and I that time I had opportunity to do classes in offline, that this transition, what I had to go through shouldn't be a problem. Another problem for international students is that finding out time between different time zones. In Canada, it's around afternoon, and I'm sitting here in Bangladesh, and it's like 1 a.m. in the night. So this time zones creates problem. For me to get prepared, I had to talk to my family that I will be occupying this room. So I think for that preparation, we need our students as well as their community, as the people around them, to prepare them, to notify them. And another thing, I as a tech savvy person, I think the to-do notes and acknowledging that I have a class next day makes me more prepared for that class. So getting an additional, rather than setting up time verbally, if I had a online invite like this one that would pop up 30 minutes before that I had a class, after 30 minutes, I would prepare myself for the classroom, the video setting, and internet. But I do love the experience I'm having in online education.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah, and I think your points there speak to the need for flexibility and empathy with students in the way that Kathy had mentioned. Providing choice in things like assessment. Knowing that it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon somewhere and 1 o'clock the next day, 1 a.m. in the morning. Yep. When you're planning when assessment is due, I think we set due dates and they're an artificial thing to begin with. They're arbitrary and artificial. We have hard deadlines, and then in between, most of it is really just pretty squishy. We choose what to do with those things, and we can choose to be human about it or not. We've probably got time for maybe one more question. We're at 3:13. I want to make sure we keep to time.
Someone wants to put something in the chat, but I can read some of the notes that were being said, some positive feedback. So Dr. Smith is saying how multimodal gets us to more clearly address universal design principles. Yep. One of those things that both domestic and international students prefer. And then someone was saying how incorporating multiple intelligence in online classroom could be a good idea for engaging students. Someone just commenting saying that meaningful and authentic experiential learning is important. So all in all, very, very positive feedback for you guys giving us your perspective.
Can I add a little note with Professor Miyata that Sure. She spoke about that we had to practice empathy in our classroom more than we used to, for our teachers and for our students. As a student, I should be empathetic about my teacher, how he or she might be feeling. He or she might have a patient in another room, and he or she is having this class. So from my teacher's perspective, from me as a teacher, I think I should be empathetic to my students. What problems might he have or she have? Yes. So I think we all need to address on that. And another small point is we need to take mental health more seriously. I personally see one of my students who was very engaging in the offline classes. He just got banished in the online classes due to this distressing time and
Yeah.
ideas. So I think these 2 points are important, and we can all of the faculty members and the academicians in here in this chat can acknowledge this too in their classrooms also.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, can I say a word or two?
Very quickly. Thank you.
All right. All right.
I see
I think
Clayton
we need to also try to retrain and continue the training on online education, because it has come to stay. A lot of students actually in Nigeria and Africa had lost interest in education and had even dropped out of school as a result of the online education. So we need to find a way to continuously create an awareness for the need of continuous retraining and retraining for both the teachers and the students, so that everybody is aware that online education, I've enjoyed it, I'm enjoying it, and it is here to stay. So let's get the mind of the international learners community aware that online education is here to stay. And so we need to seek for medium to train teachers and train students, so that we don't get to lose more students as a result of online education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists, Kathy, Owe, and Moshe, those wonderful insights. Thank you for the conversation. I see Clayton is jumping.
For chairing the panel and for all of the wonderful conversation here, which we'll hopefully see continue as we go through the next day and a half. We're going to take just a mini break here, just about 10 minutes, and then we're going to continue with the student panel. That would be at 3:25 Eastern Time. And so stretch a little bit and come back and see us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Owe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Just a quickie. We'll get started here in about 10 minutes. So looking forward to your panel.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
You're very welcome, Fatima. Okay, everybody, excuse me. We're going to get started again. Again, Clayton Smith here with the University of Windsor, and always my pleasure to serve as your MC for the day. What we're going to do next is we're going to have an international student panel. We're going to hear from students on what their perspective is on teaching and learning in open or online learning environments. So I'm going to turn it over to Shu Lee, who is one of our students, and she'll chair this panel for us. Go ahead, Shu.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So first, welcome to our international student discussion. My name is Shuli, a new graduate at the University of Windsor. My major is Second Language Acquisition and Society. So in today's meeting, we are going to explore a few questions about international learning and teaching questions, and also in our international student team, we got another 3 members. They are Ada Gosset, Mr. Peruskelapo, and Gabriela Danko. So first, can Ms. Ada Gosset introduce yourself briefly and share your teaching experiments?
I present myself, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm Adele Gousset. I'm a PhD student, a PhD candidate at the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, so Canada. I'm studying in education, and I'm coming from France after traveling to different countries. So I'm still learning in French, but it's a variation of French that I had to get used to. So I kind of facing international students' troubles, even in the country they speaking French.
Okay, great. So next one is Mr. Toulouse-Club. Are you there? Can you briefly introduce yourself and your teaching experiments?
Actually, it seems your volume is quite low, so I'm finding it hard to hear you. But I guess you're talking about Tolu Kolapo, right?
Yes, I think you're the one who's there.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Alabama, and my name is Tolu Kolapo. I'm from Nigeria, and I am currently doing my PhD in molecular biology and bioinformatics. And I've had experience teaching microbiology here in the US. And back in Nigeria, I've had experience teaching mathematics, biology, and other science related courses. I recently joined the University of Alabama for my PhD program. I had my undergraduates back in Nigeria at the University of Ibadan, and my master's program too at the University of Ibadan in animal breeding and genetics.
Okay, excellent. Thank you to introduce yourself. So next one is our Gabriela Danko. Hi, can you introduce yourself briefly and your teaching experiments?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Gabriela Dunko, and I come from Ukraine. So when I'm studying, originally I'm studying German language, and last year I used to be an international student for some time in Vienna University and Bucharest University. And right now I am a research student assistant in University of Windsor.
Okay, thank you. Good to hear you. And now, after our introduction, we are going to explore a few questions about international teaching. So first, one question, we're going to discussion question. And I also typed these questions on our meeting chat. So what do you think about this question? Can you see the question? Send it on the meeting chat.
Yes, we can. Well, I can. Personally.
Okay, great. Excuse me, Gabriela, would you mind to open your microphone loudly? Because,
okay. Yeah, I said that I can see it.
Okay. Okay, now what do you think about this question?
So maybe I could start, probably.
Yeah,
so one thing that I've noticed that everything that starts is usually some bureaucracy preparations. I'm not sure if it was the case for other international students, but in my case, there is like a lot of papers to do, etc. And you have to communicate a lot with professors in order to even start your online education. So it was like a lot, this thing. And the other thing that I have noticed is that I tend to over prepare when it comes to studying in some other countries. So what I have noticed here, students tend to think that education in Germany or in Canada, etc., is much more complex and they're not good enough, kind of thing. Or maybe that your language is not good enough and that's why you might be a little bit anxious because of that. And in my case, since I'm here a research assistant, I wanted to read a lot of articles because I thought that maybe my experience in research fields is not enough. And that is why I was a little bit anxious about it. But then I even studied some programs like SPSS, etc. Like because I thought it will be necessary for me because I don't know what would come. But then when I started my internship or just studying, I realized that students everywhere are quite similar. So it's just something that I've explored for myself. But yeah, I just try to prepare as much as I can, usually.
Okay, thank you. You share your online teaching and learning. So how about Ms. Adult? Can you share with us about your French teaching or your French learning?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I haven't had a lot of classes online to take because when the COVID-19 exploded, I was kind of in the last session of classes that I had to take. So it was pretty easy for me I just had maybe like 3 or 4 sessions online for the class. So it was pretty easy also because I kind of know computers, etc. So it was also like I'm really familiar with technology, etc. So it wasn't so hard for me for the online learning. And for online teaching, I'm also teaching a class at my university as a lecturer, and it has been online since the beginning. So I knew the platform that teachers were using, etc. So it wasn't so hard for me. I would say the hardest part is, as Gabriela said, about moving to a country and studying country where the system is totally different as the one that I knew in France, for example. We doesn't have all the scholarship money, etc., that you can apply to, and it was a lot of things that were new for me. So for the online learning on itself, I didn't have so much trouble with.
Okay, good. So excellent. How about what do you think? How about Ms. Chulup Raskalap? What do you think the online learning?
Okay. So for me, coming into the US 6 months and coming in at the time that there was COVID-19 pandemic was challenging for me, you know. And one of the things that I did was I was really open to seek for help. So I was really eager to use any Zoom opportunity that I get. There are Zoom links to book appointment with my supervisor or my lecturers. I was ready to go out to get to talk to them personally on the issues I'm facing, the challenges I have as an international student. So I used that opportunity well, trying to seek help even from my fellow students that I know, oh, they might be well, they might be good in this particular area. So I go out, seek for help. And one other thing about online learning is the fact that the distance is there. There's this distance, you can't even see your you can't see your colleagues, you can't see anyone. So I I had to break that barrier by reaching them maybe while class is on, just reach them on the Zoom, chat them privately and say, oh, I like us to have a discussion about this. And there was this other thing that I also being able to relate with my colleagues made me realize that there were several other groups that was available, like the group me. They used to group me a lot to pass information, and I was able to join some of those application, some of those units where they have these discussions, and they were so helpful. Then the other thing I also think was useful for me was I had some journal clubs that I joined, and those things, they were clubs where we get to discuss how to improve learning and how to improve on getting to know how to use some software applications, how to read a paper, and all this actually helped me and prepared me for online learning.
Thank you. Thank you, Chululo. Okay, so also our second question is, how welcome were domestic students in your opinion? You know, because when we persuade, for example, when we have international course, it is better for us to have domestic students, right? No matter in our lives, but also in our studies. You can barely hear you, can you? Okay. How about now? Is that okay? It's better than before?
It's better, but it could be a little louder.
Okay, how about this? It's
Much
okay.
better.
Okay. Okay. So, oh, great. Okay. Oh, it's okay. So now we are going to discuss some domestic students. So, so can you guys give me some opinions or your thoughts about having domestic students in our international class? So who want to share your first experiments?
Yeah, so maybe I can share my experience, but I think it really depends on the situation, because there are different educational systems, as you might know. And for example, I come from a background in my country where we have like very small groups like 10 people and that are not changing. So for example, in my undergrad, we have 10 people and we're like always the same group. So we know each other very well. When I was studying for some time in Austria, it's just the other way around. The people are always changing and people don't really know each other that much. Like there can be 50 people in one course and they're always changing. So it's quite hard for people to, gain some context even in real life. And what I found was that during online sessions, it was like that everybody was for himself in these kind of courses. It wasn't like because international students were excluded. It was just for everybody like this. I think that even domestic students weren't communicating that much with each other in Austria in this case. So that's why, I wouldn't feel, it's like I didn't have much connections there. Well, but in my research internship, it's different because it's a small group of people. And that's why you can find, some more context. And also the project is stimulating the connections between the people. So for example, soon I will have an online meeting with different interns, like student interns, and where we'll be able to discuss some things, maybe just do some communicating, etc. So I think it's much better in this case. So I think it really depends on the educational system and on the situation we're in.
Okay, thank you, Gabriela. So, can you summarize what benefits you think domestic students can bring to your international class? And yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's really exciting when domestic students reach out to you. Well, at least that's my feeling about it, that somebody actually wants to talk with you. It makes a huge difference when you are studying because you feel more included. And as we talked before in previous sessions, the sense of belonging is very important. And you feel like you want to learn more when you feel included, kind of thing. And usually there's like the teachers are trying to include international students, but domestic students are not that active, at least from my experience. Probably because they don't know what to do. Because, well, I had an experience where we had international students at our university and we wouldn't approach them because we didn't know what to do, if we were invited or not. There were no planned meetings. So you are like a little bit nervous just to contact the people. Maybe they wouldn't like you to talk with you. You don't know. So as a domestic student, it's also a challenge to go out from your comfort zone and to talk with some people that you don't really know, especially if they're like in the groups where they have their own international friends. So yeah, you're not always sure if you're welcome, but when you're an international student, you realize that you actually want domestic students to approach you.
If I may add something about what Gabrielle said, I think it's usually to the international student to go toward domestic students to engage interactions with them, because as she said, usually they don't want to engage with you because they don't know you. They also, most of the time, they already have their own group of friends or people with who they're working a lot. So it's more, they don't really need to go toward you and to talk to you as much as an international student needs to go toward domestic students. So yeah, I think for me, for example, I've started to engage with domestic students by a social activity that was outside and a non-academic activity. that's how you can engage. When it's in the classroom, sometimes you're just like working in group with them, and then after that it's just, yeah, it was nice working with you, bye. No, it's not, they are not going to invite you to have a drink or something if you don't do it yourself. As an international student, if you don't ask them to go out for a beer or whatever, for a juice, if you don't drink alcohol, then it's they will never, they will really rarely engage with you. But if they had themselves experienced the fact to be the position of being an international student at at another university.
Yeah, I totally with you and Gabriela. Just when I pursuing my master degree in Canada, I find that it's very hard to make domestic students. You know, I always scared to offend others. So, but I try to, you know, play with them and I try to make with them. So, so would you mind to share your experiments to make friends with domestic students and when during that you making friends with the domestic students, do you meet some culture difference or culture shock, and how do you deal with that?
Who are you asking the question to?
Yeah, just when you just how do you deal with the culture difference or culture shock, you know, because that is unavoidable for everyone.
For me, it's to ask questions and being shocked sometimes when my fellow domestic students are doing something that doesn't make sense for me. It's just asking them or telling them, yeah, it's why is it working like this, because in my country it's not like this that it worked, or in any countries that I visited, and I visited quite a lot, and so yeah, I think the way to deal with that is really to ask questions to the domestic students, and sometimes they will not know how to answer, so they are just asking themselves also, why do we do that? So it allows us to engage cultural differences, discussion with them, conversation, not discussion, well, yeah, conversation. Yeah, so just by asking questions. And
Okay, just to ask, it's the most important in the communication with domestic students. And I just checked the question on our meeting chat. So Angela Scuba asked, have you had opportunities to engage with indigenous students?
No, personally, I didn't have the opportunity.
Neither.
Okay, so sure. How about Tulip Lope? What do you think?
Yes, I've had chance to actually engage with the students. If I'm correct, that's the question, because I really find it hard to hear you. I'm just struggling to. So if I get your question, well, you're asking if I've had opportunity to engage with students.
With indigenous students.
Engaging a student. Okay.
So
yeah.
students from minorities, like Native American students.
Okay. Let me share my experience as a graduate teaching assistant. I've had the opportunity to or the chance to teach students that were, they were domestic and they were actually mixed. I had a number of them that they were from diverse groups or diverse origin. And one of my experiences, or one of the things that I realized while engaging with them or while teaching them is you need to make yourself very approachable, because and you need to ensure that you're really interested in a conversation with them. At the end of the day, you realize that they really also want to have a conversation, but they as much as you're taken aback, you're not sure if they want to have a conversation with you the same way they also feel about you. So it takes the other person to be able to come out and say, oh yes, I need to break this barrier and reach this person. So it takes several times I've had to be the one to go all the way, trying to reach out or engage most especially my students, then other international students. Then I was going to buttress something that Adele said. She mentioned that there were social interactions, that, like meeting, social gatherings that encouraged relationship with domestic students. And I think that's one of the things that really helped me. When I got here, I got in touch with organizations that, like student organizations in the school, that were for international students to be able to reach domestic students. So they had organizations like that when you come in, they link you up with a domestic student, so you can relate with domestic student. You can learn their culture, you can learn what they like and what they don't like. So joining that organization for me helped me to know how to relate better with them and how to engage with them, really.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to Loop. So I just check lots of sharing on our meeting chat. So I want to explore the question. So as a teachers, when we are in our teaching, as teachers, what strategies do you use to break the barriers between domestic students and international students? Because when international students are studying in other countries, it's easy for them to group their peoples rather than to reach other students from other countries. So do you have any strategies, or what kind of activities you have organized for international students or for domestic students?
Yes, so the course I taught them, the course had both an in-person, because it's hybrid, it had both the in-person aspect of it and the online aspect of it. So what I did in my case was to ensure that if we had to pair, if they had to work in pairs, I ensure that they're very diverse when I pair them to work. So sometimes when they have to work on something online, they have to do it in such a way that they're diverse in the pairing. So when I'm pairing you, I'm not pairing you with someone that you're used to talking to, you're used to relating with, you're used to, chatting with. So I deliberately pair in such a way that you don't get to relate with, you get to work with someone that you have not spoken with, or someone that you have not related with in a while. So when I do that, that forces them to come out of their shell. At least you need to do this assignment. So that gets them to talk. And, at the end of the day, when we meet in person, you realize that when they need to do the in-person aspect of that training or that course, they tend to relate better with each other. So that was what I did. I just ensured that I ensured I ensured that they were not, I didn't pair people that would normally work together with each other. So that was one strategy I used. So if they have anything online they needed to do, I ensure that that group is well mixed and they are not going to be working with someone that they're used to working with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you sharing your teaching experiments or stories. Just I remembered when I studied in University of Windsor, my professors just assigned one domestic student to match one international student. So it's very useful, I have to say, because that means you are pushed to reach other students from other countries. So okay, so our next question is how important is the student-teacher relationship to you? Does it help with your learning? And yeah, also type this question in our meeting chat. How important is the student-teacher relationship to you? Does it help with your learning?
Maybe I can go first. For me, student-teacher relationship has to be based on trust and well behavior. I would say, like, not behavior like you're mean to me, but more caring, caring relationship. Like, not a relationship that with a like I like for my teachers to be reachable and to who I can ask questions easily without thinking, okay, this teacher will never answer me or he will answer me wrongly. Like lately, I kind of engaged in a fight with one of my teacher because he was grading my paper really weirdly for me, and I never saw any teacher grading like this. So I kind of stopped engaging with him, and like for me, he's not a good teacher. Also because he couldn't listen to what I was saying and not taking care of my opinion in a way. So yeah, but a teacher who is going with you through difficulties that you can encounter in the class, or someone who is reaching out for you, asking, okay, how is it going for now? Like one of my supervisors, she's like my mom in a way. And so my PhD, my thesis actually took a step further thanks to her really encouraging me to go further in some aspects of my research, more than my other supervisor, who is more here to give me feedback whenever I ask him, but he's not here to ask me question on how are you doing, how is it going, and how can you step up your game in the PhD in a way. So yeah, trust and personal guide, yeah, in a way.
Okay, so thanks, that personal guide is really helpful for international students to especially teacher guide, So what do you think as teachers, how do you see the class configurations?
Okay, so I'm going to say that one thing that I have that helped me while teaching is the fact that I was kind of accessible to students. Like I think being accessible is very important, and being approachable, or being available anytime the students need you. So that I tried to ensure that I gave them, I was available to them. And one other thing is the idea of the relationship. Like, it's not just about what they are there to learn. It's also about how they feel and how they're doing. So as much as I'm just there to teach them and to just like I go as far as ensuring that, one, I don't start out the class on, oh, I'm here to teach and I'm done. I start out the class on wanting to know how they feel and how they feel. And sometimes I start out the class on a very should I say warm start. Like, I can say, oh, can you tell me what what movie do you like to see, or what show do you like to see? You know, they just have this chat amidst themselves, and then we start the class. So we don't just jump into the class because that is all we have to do. But I try as much as possible to ensure that they are able to relate with me as a person. They can share. Oh, and then another thing is, I try as much as possible to know their names. So when I call them by their names, oh, they feel very, yeah, so you can actually call my name. Sometimes I don't get to meet my students again until maybe because of pandemic. So I don't get to meet the same set every week. So I get to meet the same set every 4 weeks. And if after 4 weeks I can still call your name, oh, they feel so like, oh, you still remember my name? So that made them feel very close, like they're not far away. So these are the things that I did. I ensured that they were close enough, and I ensured that I spread the attention. I wasn't just giving just one person because maybe the person is showing a kind of likeness. I wasn't just giving just one person the attention. I ensured that they all had the same access to me. They could talk to me. Any one of them could feel free to reach me at any time, because I feel they all have the same right to relate with me on the same level. So that's how I've been able to maintain a student-teacher relationship with my students. And after, by the time, and because I actually taught a lab class, it was more of a lab class. They needed to do a lot of hands-on experiment, and even online, I needed to set up online lab classes for them. And one thing that can get them nervous and annoyed is when they're not getting something and then you're not there, you're not giving them the time they need to put them through. So I tried as much as possible to ensure that, oh, once they're on their online lab classes, I ensured that I was always ready to put them through. So once they send a message, oh, I'm having a problem with this, they know that they'll get a response very quickly. So that made them very adhered to me, and they feel, oh yes, they were ready to share their difficulties and the things they're facing even outside the teaching with me.
Yeah, I totally agree with Loop because when I have online class at the University of Windsor, it's good for me as an international student to my professor call me or just send a message to me that makes me more close to our study. So especially in this tough time. So um so what do you think inclusive class in online setting just what okay, so maybe we can see in this way. So okay, so I just when I take my master courses, I made one situation that in our class online setting, it's it's very weird for people just to for my classmates and me just to keep silence when we take online class. So how as a teacher, how do you deal with this situation? And when you meet this situation, how what strategies are you going to use?
So are you asking from the teacher perspective or from the student perspective?
How about the teacher perspective? But if you want to talk about the more students' perspective, that is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just that I guess it depends on the educational system again. So I have studied in the systems where asking questions is always welcome. And actually it shows that you're participating, and actually it seems as if the teachers want that from you. So I think it's more problematic for foreign students that are not used to asking questions. Yeah, but in my case, it was different because I'm usually asking a lot of questions. So in here and in other countries, I felt like it was all right.
Okay, thank you, Gabriela. So Miss Adat, would you mind to share, just when you teaching French in other countries, do you meet this situation? Just the students always keep silence, and how do you deal with that?
That was challenging actually to have my student participating in class, especially in Asia. It was just it was really, really difficult, and plus there were actually 30 to 40 people in a language class, so talking was difficult for them since it was a huge group. I couldn't really have time and space for them to speak to me or with each others. It was through different activities outside the classroom that students who wanted to participate came, and they were talking nonstop. Sometimes I couldn't stop them even to speak. But I think in a classroom, like if I'm not teaching to international students right now, but I would say that to ask them questions and to give them riddles or projects to do where they have to engage and talk in the targeted language, then it will make them more participant in the classroom. I would say that especially if it's a group of international students, they will be more willing because as international students, we are all in the same basket, as I would say in French. So we are all living the same experience of being in a country where we can't speak the language in a way. So it would create kind of emulsion of people wanting to engage in the target language, and anyway they will have to speak in the targeted language because they are not talking the same language originally. So yeah, I think through riddles, questions, or projects, it would be actually a good idea. Sorry for my cat.
So, so Miss Adam, so just if, you know, because class silence happens a lot in my online course. So, so just when you meet this situation, and do you get do you going to give suggestions to your students, like, oh hey, or send messages like, oh hey, I just noticed you have a long time not to communicate with your classmates in our class, so you know, like this kind of message or suggestions, do you send, you know, these suggestions to your students, you know, engage them to more class with your classmates?
I think it could be a good idea actually to reach out to the student personally and asking the student, okay, are you what do you have any problems? Do you have any troubles talking with your fellow students? Do you have any issue understanding this part of the language? Or I think, yeah, reaching out to the student. I never did that, but I guess reaching out to the student personally would be actually a good idea. Yeah.
I was going to add something to what she just said, and I was going to say that though the online teaching I had, or that I have experienced, is more of having to record a video of myself teaching, and it didn't have students participating. They just needed to watch the video and learn from it. So the participatory aspect of the students wasn't taken into account. But I have also, like from my classes, online classrooms, I saw some things that my lecturers did, and some of it is to ensure that a student, one of us, leads the class. So we get to lead the class, and then we get to engage the student ourselves. So with that propelled, since we know that, oh, we're within ourselves, that propelled people to communicate, to engage themselves, and to discuss. And then we are being graded by how well we participate. So that kind of made everyone to come out of the shell to just say something. And then while the lecturer just wait back and watch us participate. So that was one thing that I think the lecturer used, and was very effective to encourage online communication and online teaching. And the other thing was also that we, like I said, for some other courses, we had our lecturers ensuring that we deliberately ask questions, because we are being graded for participating. We are being graded for discussing. So you want to read up something and come and discuss and ask questions, because you know, oh, sometime I'm being graded for this. So that's kind of propelled us and encouraged us to learn and to engage with other students.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Adat, thank you, Ms. Gabriela, and thank you to Loop. So because of our time, limited time, so we have to wrap up here. So our next discussion is debriefing and the synthesis session at 4:15 p.m. So, okay, we just left 1 minute, so see you then.
Okay, everybody, thanks very much. That was marvelous. That's one of the things that we want to do, is to get the student perspective out there, and you did a great job doing that. So thanks for doing that. Next, we have two of our University of Windsor stars to join us. We have Dr. Bonnie Stewart, Dr. Nobuko Fujita, and they are going to lead a session that's called Debriefing and Synthesis, whatever that might mean. I'll let them tell you about that. And we're right on time, so let's just keep going. Go ahead.
We'll just roll right on in.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Clayton. And Nobuko has actually, I'm Bonnie Stewart. It's lovely to be here. And Nobuko has done up a little slide deck, actually, overviewing the day, which I really appreciate, Nobuko. I have not managed anything nearly so impressive out of the day. But I guess what I may do while Nobuko leads that is I just want to pose in the chat for folks. How was your day? I had a pretty amazing day, actually, in and out of a variety of things. And I just want to welcome people to share any highlights that popped out for them, whether ideas or sessions they attended. And I'll turn the rest of that over to you, Nobuko, and kind of just, I'll engage with what you were leading.
Yeah, well, Bonnie, it's difficult because there's so many amazing sessions, and listening to all these is basically impossible. I mean, there's so many, and they're running concurrently. So I feel bad if I don't mention the wonderful session that you're in. I'm getting a little circle as I'm trying to share my screen. So just bear with me. Why is it not letting me do this? Come on, share content. Where is the other screen?
Well, you get that sorted.
Yeah,
I'll talk until you cut me off.
Yeah, that sounds
as
good.
Is my way. I found that one of the things that stuck out for me today was how interesting it was that there were so many commonalities, even though I was hearing from folks in so many different spaces and so many different environments and roles within the academy. The takeaway for me was there was a really strong message, that international online education in particular needs to be intercultural. And also that there were a lot of really practical and helpful foci on things like sort of moving theory to practice. I've been working in online ed for a long time, as has Nobuko, but at the same time, this past year, we've seen all of our colleagues suddenly engaging with all of these aspects of online learning and all of these principles of online learning. And everyone does seem to be kind of coming to fairly common conclusions, particularly around the challenges of online learning and some of the inequities of online learning that we need to address. So those were the pieces that really stuck out for me. I don't know, I think the equity of training piece was a note that I had made. I had the pleasure of, in the afternoon session during one of the concurrent sessions, an old colleague of mine from when I was at UP, Eileen Wan-Gold-Brennan, was presenting with Julie Massey, and they were talking about, using online learning to empower global citizens. And one of the key elements that stuck out for me in that was flexibility and sort of expanding people's perspectives as they engaged in online. That piece around flexibility, I don't know how many folks in the chat or who are with us today, but if you want to put in the chat, how many of you found that this past year demanded a need to be flexible? Was that something that was a common experience? Because that was something I was hearing from a lot of the folks who were presenting today. Yeah. Nick mentions, one important takeaway in many sessions, even today, we had some challenges with colleagues joining from different time zones and really great demonstrations of empathy and the flexibility needed. In a way, the conversation today struck me as a microcosm of a lot of the experiences that we've had this past year. There is something really important about bringing people together, whether under four walls of a classroom or in an online space. It is really messy when we bring humans together. right? And particularly when we are working from different contexts, from different devices, from different time zones, from different languages and understandings of what things mean, from sometimes our devices fail us. There was a point this afternoon where my earpods just ran out and I was like, oh, I can't hear anybody all of a sudden. It sounds really faint. And, you know, then I realized that actually my, my earpods had just died. But the point that Francis is making here at the bottom of the chat right now, I learned that being flexible did not diminish the learning of the students or the efficacy of my teaching was really important. I know that after this, Jess Mitchell is going to have a keynote and kind of gather us together to think about themes of, I think it's theory to practice. And so I think this is kind of fitting because I felt like this year, what I was hearing from people was that this year embodied a lot of the praxis work that, you know, again, many of us have talked about for a long time, but suddenly when we are all doing it, we get to see where the tensions emerge and how we can be of support to each other. So that was one of the key things for me. Just checking in, Nabucco, I think you're changing laptops. Are you doing okay?
Yes, I'm changing laptops and I'm authenticating on all different levels. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share the slides, the link to the slides, and that's just maybe, I don't know, Bonnie, if you want to share some of them. But, sorry about this. I should have double checked that it'll work on my current system that I upgraded recently. Okay.
But again,
so
this is the microcosm of how it works.
Basically, this is how it works. And just bear with me here. So part of for me, online learning is all about flexibility and just kind of having to do things on the spot, right? So, and as much as we plan them, it's still, you still have to adapt. So here's the link. Hopefully you guys can follow along if you like. And that should open up for everyone. And it's just like we start off with the title slide. Sorry about that. And the conference organizers. Yeah. Yes. So if you want to follow along, you can. But I mean, here, I'll put my video on. I don't want to bombard you with slides, because I really like it to be a conversation. And thanks, Monty, for starting it up that way. So some of the themes, Fatima kindly sent some themes that the conference organizers, Clayton, George, and others had come up with based on the submissions. And these, there's a little overlap on them that on the slide number 2, you'll see that, you know, the first one was teaching practices to enhance online international students' learning. And that overlaps a little for me with the effects of the pandemic on education and adapting to the shift on online delivery. So there's some screen caps or screenshots of the sessions that I was able to attend. And so if you go through those slides, you'll see some screenshots, presenters. I'm sorry. I did try to cite you as much as I could, and you'll see the recordings. So one of them, Adam Agnostinelli, he provided some nice background literature on the challenges that all students face and also international students in particular. I thought that gave us a nice overview of the kind of challenges that international students face, and all students in fact face.
Nabucco, can I just ask, what were the key challenges that came out from Adam? Because Nabucco and I tried to balance out and not go to the same things, but I know that there were probably lots that neither of us caught. But in terms of what you caught, what were Adam's key challenges?
Oh yeah, I mean, all students, as I experienced today, and I've been doing online stuff for 20 years, right? So all students and all instructors experience technical problems, time-related scheduling issues. So I know some of you are joining us from other parts of the world, and all of us who've taught feel this horrible feeling of a lack of engagement because, well, we can't see your reactions to what we say. We don't know if we've lost you and you've just tuned out entirely and are now watching TikToks. And the lack of motivation, because I know Dave Cormier from our office has worked with students who have worked on, how to motivate students and how can they stay interested when they don't understand what their instructor's saying. All their courses are online. They don't know who anybody else is, that sort of thing. And then more specific things, getting differences between academic and more informal English, maybe using idioms and colloquialisms that make it hard for students to follow us. And sort of the feeling of interaction is lacking or difficult to engage in. So as an instructor, I try very hard to engage international students, but maybe they don't want to, international students might feel uncomfortable being told to join a breakout group of people they never spoken with. And that happened in the B.Ed program too. Even if they're domestic, they don't know each other if they're in the concurrent program. Social cues as always, that sort of thing. So nothing new in terms of online world. This research has been around for the last, 30 years. But I was really struck by the different sort of frameworks, theoretical, conceptual, just approaches to that. And the student perspectives really opened my eyes, because though I had been an international student at one point, or an international postdoc for sure, I never realized just how challenging it would be if everything was online.
I was really struck by that in the panel that just ended with the international students around how much onus there is on international students to make all the social connections and carry most of the emotional and social labor of, I was going to use the word integrating, but I'm not sure that that's actually what's happening. And that was kind of the message that I took away. I have taught internationally, but I was never an international student myself. And so it was really, I appreciated hearing from those students on the panel kind of the challenges that are probably not unique to online, but certainly exacerbated by the online environment in terms of building connection. I noticed that connection was an interesting theme through a lot of the presentations that I sat in on. And there are tools that I have as an educator to build connection online, but a lot of them have relied on having students kind of open to working at least to connect with new people, and maybe even people out in the world, not just in the class, depending on the size of the class. And I have pulled back from some of those practices over recent years, because as Twitter has become more toxic and a lot of spaces have become very much less than safe spaces, particularly for students who are women, who are people of color, that's become something that I want to be cognizant of in bringing people online. I noticed too, like there were questions in some of the afternoon sessions. I was in one with, I think it was session E in the second afternoon session with Matt Devlin and Surush Sabagan from UCalgary. And they were talking about there was a really good question asked about student fatigue and disengagement. Did that come up at all in your day, Nabucco? Did anyone talk about sort of how to keep students engaged and willing to connect?
So my observation sort of ties into the faculty panel, where they're finding it to be a struggle, because I think we all experience it, at least I experienced it, where I just tired of looking at the screen, and the students are tired of that kind of transmission teaching where there's a lecture going on and they don't do anything other than maybe discussion. And especially for I think in the faculty panel, sorry if I say your name wrong, Masarov, I think, it was talking about how in the STEM disciplines, people want to do things. And that was echoed in some of the session for my co-presenter, Dr. Pasak. Pasak was talking about getting students to do something online, which is different from having them do sort of a design lab type studio activity in face-to-face, and then losing the students. I mean, if you didn't do something like that. So I think it's really important to come up with something to connect students with each other in a safe way, where they're not just discussing. So there's, I think, a talk about creating things like infographics or videos, something different from papers. And I attended a really great session where students were, well, first researching things related to their thesis interest, like PhD students, but was not their thesis project based on this pandemic experience, and also publishing with their peers. So it was like, as Nick mentioned, they kind of made a course experience into a real paper that they put out there to share their experiences. So it wasn't just an assignment for a class. So
sort of like a non-disposable assignment.
Yeah, non-disposable assignment. Yeah, and I hope that some of the students consider putting out their experiences from online learning in the last while. And I would love to see students work together, not just international students by themselves, but with the domestic students that get sort of a balanced view to help us move forward. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I think that term disposable, non-disposable assignments, Clayton, I think it comes from David Wiley, or at least I'm familiar with it through David Wiley's work. And it's the idea, I do this a lot with my own students, using online tools, whether the course is fully online or not. So I used it this past year because we were fully online, but even in the fullness of time, if I get to go back into the face-to-face classroom, I will continue to do this. I'll talk with my students at the start of the year about some of the digital literacies that we are building are doing work that is visible and meant to be seen by an audience. And I'll ask them, how much of the work that you've done up till now in school has only ever been seen by one set of eyes, right? And how much work, how many hours of your life have you poured into work that is only going to be seen by one pair of eyes? And not necessarily for every assignment or for every discipline, but certainly in the work that I'm doing, because I'm teaching stuff like digital literacies, it's really valuable to get the students thinking about their peers in the class and possibly the public as an audience for their work. And so they are always showing some of their work. Sometimes they have an opportunity to get it to the level before they want it shown, but and commenting on each other's work. And I'll teach them how to give meaningful feedback, formative feedback. And that does help. I noticed in the faculty panel, the conversation about relationships came up, right? And there was a mention of, it may have been something that Kathy Miata brought up, or maybe Musarraf Hussain, about what is your ratio, right? So some classes are just so big that it's almost impossible for the instructor to do sort of high touch contact with each student on every communication. And I think that's very valid. One of the things about non-disposable assignments or having students be something of an audience for each other's work is that then you don't have to be the only pair of eyes on their work as the instructor. And that's certainly something that I found valuable. I just saw something pop up in the chat about what is an international student, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, what is?
Yeah, because I mean, yes, we all live in an international world. The construct of institutions is deeply bound to the idea or illusion of the nation state as a thing, and therefore something that we can charge fees that are differential for students who may come from outside that country. But for sure, and I think we miss an opportunity if we see education as something that doesn't prepare all students to be citizens of the world. This past year has been a real cautionary tale, perhaps, lesson in how perhaps we need as a society to learn ways of working together. And certainly as we face challenges beyond the pandemic, like climate, I think having some of that sense of being global citizens may be of increasing value.
Mm-hmm. And just to build on that, I'd like to go back to the keynote with Nadia Abzara and colleagues from Ottawa, and really compelling story from Shannon of that Blue Sky University and some of the wide-scale changes needed. And that was one form with some principles, and they had 10 of them, that was more inclusive and had a part of this sort of relational accountability and citizenship. And I could consider that like a digital literacy too. This idea and making that the norm, I would love to see that happen. And it sort of looks forward to Jess Mitchell's talk about, I'm not sure what you're talking about exactly, Jess, but she is known for inclusive design. And being able to give all learners a sense of belonging and connectedness, and to build a relationship with their instructor and their peers if possible. I think that would be a real change towards a better kind of educational experience in higher education, in K-12 education, where everybody feels like they actually have a relationship, and that the teacher cares about them. I think that's important.
All of us work better when we feel we're cared about, right? I mean, that's true. Perhaps particularly when we're online, the onus becomes, is a little higher on the teacher to find ways to demonstrate that care. And I was really heartened by all that I heard today about the different ways that people have found to try to demonstrate that care. But circling back to the point that you brought out from the keynote, I think in the afternoon panel, someone had mentioned, I think it may have been Kathy. She had a wide and diverse class of students from all over the world, and who had not been able to come to Canada to study as planned due to the pandemic. And therefore, what I wrote down in my handy dandy, this is my very well organized note sheet for the day, which old school pen and paper, was, these students had no concept of Ontario teaching and learning, and the structures and just kind of the things that we swim around in and don't see because they are the water that we are in. I only came to Ontario as a professional context a couple of years ago, and even just the different, I teach in a Bachelor of Education program, but I've never actually taught in Ontario K-12 schools. And there were a number of things that are quite different from the context in Canada that I have taught in, and I had to learn those pieces. And part of when we are thinking about building classes and education systems that teach global citizens is perhaps being sometimes a little bit more didactic, or giving clear scaffolding about, these are broad concepts that work in a variety of contexts. These are specific things that you might not know about the context that we're credentialing for, or that I'm speaking to right at this moment, right? Being perhaps better at recognizing our own places where we're signaling and students can't pick up those signals because they're working in entirely different contexts. That's one of the great advantages of working in international contexts, is you begin to see larger patterns rather than just, this is how it is here. And I noticed somebody, I think in the students panel that was mentioned, right? That there are really different systems in different places. And there's great learning that comes from having experience of different systems, but we need to draw on those things and make them more explicit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm just reading the chat here. Yes, the cultures of learning, as Julie points out, learning and teaching are very important to keep in mind because they are different, and we take it as a given in Ontario or maybe even in Canada of what we consider good learning. You know, there's like a big emphasis on inquiry-based learning or constructivist learning in schools of education in Canada, where you're supposed to construct knowledge and co-create meaning with each other. That might not be the norm in places like Asia, and in higher education, actually, where there's a lot of teacher-centric and sort of transmission of information mode of teaching. And that's great, because if you're teaching to a class of 450 students, it's really hard to have some kinds of breakout activities or small group activities or collaborative activities. You have to be a little bit more innovative and inventive. Stick your neck out and take a risk, right, of things going wrong. So yes, direct instruction through lecture, it's our default. And when we start using technology that we're uncomfortable with, we kind of default to it. And if you're working with students who expect you to do that they're going to get knowledge from you, they're going to take lots of notes or get the lecture notes with a lot of content, it's a very different expectation. So if they're getting a short video, they're wondering, or their parents are wondering, where is their university education that the teacher is supposed to teach me? So it's a really hard thing to make a transition towards student-centered teaching, where the student has to be more self-directed and regulate themselves, so they have to pay attention and be motivated. So I'm just going to get off my soapbox and ask you, those of you in the audience, please, I think our group is reasonably small. Unmute your mic or put your hand up and ask us any questions or comments. Yeah. Yeah, Gabriella says, it really helped her as a student to know the background of the educational system of the country that she was going to. Yeah, we need to discuss it more explicitly. What are the expectations? And I used to study graduate education. So what are the expectations in a graduate seminar as opposed to a large undergraduate lecture, right? When you go to Scandinavian countries, and I did a postdoc in Denmark, the sort of the expectation was group-based, problem-based learning. PBL was the norm. But how would you know that if you had never participated in that kind of learning, right? Or to know that the students expected you to be able to defend and answer any question that they had, because they're very, they like to say, but, you know, this is my perspective, what do you think? And then you lose authority if you said, I didn't know as a teacher, right? So it's really important to have those discourses around the kind of teaching and learning that we're asking students to engage in. What are the norms around that, like the social norms of the classroom or the program or the institution? Like, I don't think it's really explicit.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I'm seeing that theme, and glad that Gabriella brought it up, because it was certainly the panel that she was part of that I heard it come out in first. But that idea of both what she's saying about making understanding and making explicit the context in which we're speaking and to which we're speaking, and also Carol's point about the fact that actually international domestic is not a binary, but rather people are engaged in our classrooms in all kinds of complex ways and identities and have all kinds of status positions, and understanding that kind of social location piece. And yes, just as point, each class becomes unique for sure, right? So what I hear overall is we probably need to look at our own assumptions and make them explicit, and also make room for each class to become a unique community. And now I think it is time. Nabucco, lovely to talk about the end of the day with you. Thanks for having us, Clayton. We'll be back tomorrow, folks,
Yes.
to talk about day 2, and also about Jess and Clayton, who are wrapping up day 1 tonight. So looking forward to it, folks.
Well, thank you both. That was inspiring, thought-provoking, and makes me want to reflect a bit. So thanks, appreciate that. And